In a distant galaxy, where the mighty empires of the Aethels, with their sophisticated technology, and the Volgons, with their absolute brute strength, reigned supreme, humanity was merely a faint whisper, a forgotten race on the fringes of the universe. They possessed no energy manipulation abilities, no superhuman senses, and their bodies were but fragile bags of flesh and bone compared to the cosmic giants. Most humans survived by performing despised labor, from sweeping space stations to toiling as miners on harsh planets. On the planet Kareth, a desolate gray sphere ravaged by dust storms and extreme temperatures, lay one of the Volgon Empire's largest mining facilities. This was a living hell, where rare gemstones were brutally extracted through forced labor. The ceaseless roar of machinery, the barking commands of the Volgons, and the clang of metal echoed throughout the tunnels. Amidst this chaotic scene, there was a small girl with strangely sharp, black eyes. Her name was Emma. Emma had no impressive appearance. She was scrawny, her black hair often matted with mine dust, and her hands were calloused from gripping crude tools. Her task was to maintain the colossal mining machines, a job the Volgons considered too menial for their strength. But for Emma, it was a privilege, while the giant Volgons only saw the machines as inert blocks of metal. Emma saw them as complex organisms, with every joint, every hidden wire concealing a secret. She spent hours observing. She didn't just watch how gears turned or pistons operated, she studied the energy flow, listened for the unusual squeal of a failing bearing, or noticed even the slightest tremor of a robotic arm. She memorized every system diagram, every recurring technical fault. At the same time, Emma also constantly observed her alien colleagues. She noticed how the Volgons used their strength wastefully, how they moved ponderously, creating large blind spots, or how other races, though more agile, lacked flexible adaptability. "Hey, human, over here," a growling voice boomed. It was Kale, a Volgon supervisor with grayish-green skin and bloodshot red eyes. He always disdained Emma and members of weaker races. "Drill number 7 is malfunctioning again. If you can't fix it before this shift ends, you'll work overtime." Emma didn't argue. She silently approached the massive machine. Everyone thought it needed a large engine part replaced. A day-long job, but Emma had observed this machine for a long time. She knew the problem wasn't the engine, but a small sensor clogged with dust in the most difficult-to-reach spot. In just a few minutes, she slipped her hand into the narrow crevice and used a small tool to clean the component. The machine started smoothly again. Kale's eyes widened in astonishment. He was about to say something, but then just snorted and walked away. This wasn't the first time Emma had fixed problems that stumped Volgon engineers, or issues they considered too minor to bother with. With each passing day, Emma's conviction grew stronger. Strength wasn't just about muscle. It lay in understanding, in the ability to see through the essence of things, and in the patience to find even the smallest vulnerabilities. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she didn't want to remain a nameless shadow in this galaxy forever. Somewhere deep in her mind, Emma began to nurture a crazy idea, a faint glimmer of hope for something bigger, an opportunity to prove humanity's worth. Life in the Kareth mine continued with its familiar brutal rhythms. But for Emma, everything had changed. Kale's disdainful glances or the Volgan's growls no longer discouraged her. Instead, they became a source of motivation, strengthening her will to escape her mundane fate. The idea of an intergalactic tournament, where physical strength was often the decisive factor, lingered in Emma's mind. Many nights, after exhausting shifts, instead of seeking sleep, Emma would sneak into the mine's abandoned storage areas. Under the dim light of homemade flashlights, she meticulously disassembled and reassembled old machine parts. Not to fix them, but to understand. She studied the operating mechanisms of robotic arms, the durability of alloys, and even how force was distributed through each joint. She realized that even the strongest machines had weaknesses, links that could be broken if one knew how to apply force in the right place. Emma also began to train herself. She didn't have professional training equipment, but she had the mine's rugged terrain. She practiced climbing over debris, squeezing through narrow crevices, and dodging rapidly moving automated transport vehicles. Every day, she tried to push her limits, not to increase muscle strength, but to improve her agility, reaction time, and balance. She learned how to fall with minimal injury, how to land softly, and how to use inertia to change direction suddenly. During rare breaks, Emma would often sneak to the mine's communal communication area, where large screens broadcast intergalactic sporting events. She wasn't interested in speed races or displays of brute force. Her eyes were fixed on the duels in the Infinity Arena. She observed every movement of the hulking Volgon fighters, how they moved, how they struck, and, more importantly, how they revealed even the smallest blind spots or openings when executing high-intensity attacks. She saw that, despite their immense strength, their bulk often made them susceptible to losing balance or struggling to maneuver when attacked at key joints. One night, while watching a match, a giant Volgon named Brakos easily defeated his opponent. Brakos was known for being invincible, with steel punches and extraordinary endurance. Emma couldn't help but admire his power. But at the same time, she noticed something. Every time Brakos threw an extremely powerful punch, he had to shift his entire weight onto one leg, causing the opposite knee joint to twist slightly and unnaturally for a fleeting moment. It was an incredibly small flaw, appearing only for an instant, but it was a weakness that could be exploited. "What are you doing here, human?" a raspy voice asked. It was Xylos, an old Volgon who worked as a gatekeeper at the mine. He had the same bulky appearance as other Volgons, but his eyes held a weariness and a subtle difference. Emma startled, quickly turning away. I was just watching the news." Xylos snorted, not too surprised. "Watching those crazy guys punch each other? Such useless games. No matter how hard you humans try your whole lives, you'll never amount to anything." Emma remained silent, but her resolve was unshaken. She knew Xylos said that because of what he'd been taught, because of what the entire galaxy had believed for centuries. But she would prove otherwise. The more she studied, the more Emma realized that while human physical strength couldn't compare to other races, they had a huge advantage: their brains and incredible adaptability. Humans could learn, analyze, and change tactics faster than any other creature. This was her weapon. It was time. The annual Infinity Arena tournament had been announced. Thousands of warriors from across the galaxies would flock to the central arena of the Galactic Alliance. Emma knew she would be laughed at, scorned, but this was her only chance. She wouldn't seek power to confront directly, but would find a way to break the unwritten rules of the arena. To prove that, sometimes, the weakest is the most dangerous. News of the Infinity Arena tournament spread through the Kareth mine like wildfire. The Volgons, powerful and somewhat simple creatures, only discussed the great warriors, the fiery punches, and the enormous betting sums. Humans and other weaker races simply listened in silence, viewing it as a distant spectacle. But for Emma, it was a calling. She had trained, observed, and was ready. One evening, after her shift ended, Emma went to the mine's registration office, a small room managed by an old Volgon named Borin, who had a grumpy demeanor and an extreme dislike for paperwork. "What do you want, human?" Borin grunted as Emma entered. His eyes were still glued to a gambling screen displaying a virtual boxing match. "I want to register for the Infinity Arena," Emma said, her voice small but resolute. Borin stopped playing, slowly raising his head, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Emma, as if she had just said something utterly ridiculous. Then he burst out laughing. A raspy, choking laugh that echoed through the room. "You, a human? Huh? You intend to join that tournament? How utterly ridiculous." Borin's laughter attracted the attention of a few other Volgons passing by. They gathered around, listened to the story, and couldn't help but join in the mocking laughter. Is this world insane? A tiny human wanting to face Groner or Brakos? A large Volgon in rusty metal armor sneered. "Are you going to scratch them with your fingernails?" Emma didn't react to the taunts. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on Borin. "I have the right to register. Alliance law permits all citizens." Borin, despite his annoyance, knew Emma was right. The regulations of the Galactic Alliance, though created to protect the larger races, also contained small clauses regarding the right of all individuals to participate. He sighed, pulling out a composite metal registration form. "Name, race, identifier code?" Emma answered clearly, each word a small declaration amidst the scorn of those around her. She placed her fingerprint in the confirmation box, completing the registration process. As she left, the laughter still echoed behind her. But Emma knew it was just the last laugh before everything changed. News of a human named Emma registering for the Infinity Arena quickly spread. It didn't cause a shockwave, but merely became a new joke in bars and industrial zones. A human? She'll definitely be crushed in the first round. She'll definitely be eliminated in seconds. Even bookmakers didn't offer odds for Emma, deeming it a waste of data. If they did, the odds would be 1,000 to 1, or more. But somewhere, in the hidden corners of the galaxy, there were those who were quietly observing. A few oppressed humans on distant planets heard the news, and a faint glimmer of hope sparked within them. Some data analysts of the Aethels, with their superior intellect, also noted the event. They didn't laugh. They simply recorded in their reports that an unusual social experiment was underway and decided to monitor its progress. Emma returned to the mine, resuming her daily work, but her preparations were now more urgent than ever. She knew she wasn't just fighting for herself, but also for the faint voice of all humanity. The first match would be a formidable challenge, and she had to face it with everything she had: her intelligence, adaptability, and an unyielding will. The fateful moment arrived. The Infinity Arena, a colossal metal structure gleaming under the light of a neutral planet, was now packed with cheering spectators. Thousands of races, from the elegant Aethels gliding through the VIP stands to the frenzied Volgons roaring in the general admission area, had all gathered to witness the spectacle of power and glory. The atmosphere in the arena was thick with excitement and noise. On the large screens suspended in midair, the faces of the combatants appeared. When it was Emma's turn, a small murmur at first, then quickly turned into roars of laughter and mocking whistles. A human? Look, it's the tiny girl. She's going to be blown away. The arena operators even had to increase the volume of the gong signaling the match to drown out the jeers. Emma's opponent in the first round was Vorlag the Bonecrusher, a giant Volgon with the nickname, the Bonecrusher. Vorlag had grayish, rocky skin, 4 bulging muscular arms, and eyes red like embers. He was 3 times Emma's height, and each of his steps made the arena floor tremble. Vorlag was a brutal fighting machine, famous for ending matches by breaking his opponent's bones in seconds. He was considered a perfect, warm-up opponent for top fighters. Someone meant only to create an impressive debut. Emma stepped into the arena, her eyes sweeping over the noisy crowd. She felt the contempt, but didn't let it affect her. Her gaze locked onto Vorlag, who stood opposite her, growling menacingly. He didn't even bother to hide his disdain, treating her as insignificant prey. The opening gong sounded, fierce and definitive. Vorlag immediately charged, his heavy steps surprisingly fast for his massive frame. His 2 upper arms swung, delivering a steel punch to where Emma had just been standing. A resounding crash echoed, and the arena floor cracked. Emma had dodged. She didn't retreat, but moved sideways with incredible agility, mere centimeters from the deadly blow. She didn't have the strength to block, so dodging was the only option. She moved constantly, never staying in one place, like a ghost slipping through Vorlag's hammer-like punches. Vorlag roared in frustration. He launched a barrage of punches, cornering Emma against the arena wall. Each blow carried terrifying power, creating swirling gusts of wind and cracking the floor. Emma, with the meticulous observation she had practiced in the mine, noticed that every time Vorlag threw a powerful punch, he shifted his center of gravity forward, exposing the inside of his elbow joint for an extremely brief moment. It was a tricky weakness, well protected under normal circumstances, but exposed when he used his full strength. With a daring calculation, Emma no longer dodged far away. When Vorlag threw an extremely powerful punch with his right hand, she didn't retreat, but charged forward instead, slipping through the narrow gap beneath his swinging arm. With a lightning-fast motion, she used her entire body weight and the inertia from her movement to kick hard into the very inside of Vorlag's elbow joint. A dry crack echoed. It wasn't the sound of breaking bone, but the sound of the joint of the light metal armor Vorlag was wearing popping open, followed by the sound of overstretched muscles. Vorlag's arm was grotesquely deflected. He roared in pain and lost his balance. The audience fell silent. They couldn't believe their eyes. A weak human, without a weapon, without any obvious combat skills, could injure a giant Volgon like Vorlag? Vorlag, enraged by the humiliation, charged again with his remaining 3 arms. Determined to crush Emma, he moved slower, but was still extremely dangerous. Emma continued to dodge, but this time, she didn't just dodge, she began to lead Vorlag. She glided towards a massive pillar in the center of the arena. Then suddenly changed direction. Vorlag, with his limited vision and bulkiness, couldn't react in time. He crashed into the pillar with tremendous force. A boom echoed. The pillar shook, and Vorlag, despite his strength, stumbled, his head spinning. Immediately, Emma lunged. She didn't attack his face or torso, but aimed directly at the back of his knee joint that she had observed for so long. A swift, precise kick, utilizing her full body weight and the twisting force from her movement, struck the weakest point of his leg. A final roar of pain erupted from Vorlag as his knee joint twisted. The giant lost his balance completely, collapsing to the arena floor like a felled mountain. He tried to get up, but couldn't. The referee, an old Volgon, looked down at Vorlag writhing on the arena floor, then at Emma standing there, breathing heavily but with unwavering determination. He hesitated for a few seconds, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. Finally, with a definitive voice, he announced, "Round over. The winner is Emma." The entire arena fell silent. Then a resounding cheer erupted. But it wasn't the frenzied excitement from before, but rather extreme astonishment. The mocking laughter had died down, replaced by whispers of amazement. Everyone asked the same question. How could a human? Emma didn't celebrate. She just stood there, head held high, her eyes sweeping across the stunned faces in the crowd. This was just the beginning. She had proven that humanity was no joke. And now, the entire galaxy would have to pay attention. The referee's declaration still echoed, but the silence in the Infinity Arena was now torn apart by a wave of chaotic sound. Initially, there were whispers of astonishment. Then the discussions grew louder. And finally, an unprecedented uproar. No one could believe their eyes. Vorlag the Bonecrusher, one of the Volgon's undefeated warriors, had been defeated by a human. A weak human. Immediately, the Galactic Alliance's rankings and betting systems collapsed. Predictive algorithms, programmed to calculate based on physical strength and race, were utterly bewildered by this unthinkable outcome. The impossible odds for Emma now exploded, plunging thousands of intergalactic bookmakers into financial chaos. Those who had bet colossal sums on Vorlag screamed in outrage, while those extremely rare individuals who had bet on Emma with faint hope were now rich in an instant. In the VIP stands, members of the Aethels, known for their composure and superior intellect, couldn't hide their astonishment. Aethel data analysts, who had initially considered Emma merely a social experiment, were now frantically running simulations and reanalyzing data. Impossible, according to physical theory. According to the laws of biomechanics, this makes no sense, a silver-haired Aethel whispered, her blue eyes wide and unblinking. They had witnessed Emma use not strength, but intellect, precision, and the ability to exploit weaknesses to defeat an opponent utterly superior in physicality. This was an entirely new concept to them. Meanwhile, in the arena's medical bay, Emma was being examined by Volgon doctors. They looked at her with expressions of both confusion and caution. Her arm was bruised, her body aching from dodging and impacts. Yet, she maintained remarkable composure. "Will my arm be okay?" she asked, her voice steady. The head Volgon doctor grumbled, his red eyes intently focused on the X-ray screen. "No broken bones, just severe muscle strain and bruising. You're very lucky, human, or perhaps your bones are made of Volgon steel." He couldn't comprehend how a frail being like Emma could withstand such pressures. As Emma was being treated, news of her match spread like a tsunami across the galaxy. Every media channel replayed the moment Emma slipped past Vorlag's punch and her decisive kick to his knee. Commentary programs relentlessly dissected the match, trying to uncover the secret behind the humans' victory. For the humans living precariously in oppressed settlements, this information was not just news, but a radiant spark in the desperate darkness. On mining planets, crowded space stations, or industrial slums. Humans who had once bowed their heads in resignation now looked up. They gathered before public screens, replaying the match again and again, feeling an unprecedented sense of pride. A human did it. Whispers of hope began to spread. Kale, the Volgon supervisor at the Kareth mine, roared in anger as he watched the news report. He couldn't accept that one of his subordinates, a useless human, could have done such a thing. His arrogance had been dealt a heavy blow. Meanwhile, in the high-level defense committees of the Galactic Alliance, an emergency meeting had been convened, not to discuss a military threat, but to deliberate on the human problem. Military strategists, diplomats, and scientists were grappling with a perplexing question: how to deal with a species once considered insignificant, that had now demonstrated a frightening ability, the capacity to adapt and break all known rules. If a single individual could do this, how dangerous would a collective of humans be? Emma's battle was not just a sports match. It was a jolt to the galaxy's hierarchy. A declaration that the old rules no longer applied. Humanity was no longer a whisper. Now, the eyes of the entire galaxy were fixed on Emma, the small warrior with extraordinary intellect. Emma's victory was not just a wake-up call. It was a shockwave that rattled the very foundations of assumptions about power and order in the galaxy. At the highest levels of the Galactic Alliance, an emergency meeting had been convened in the top-secret strategic chamber on the central planet Celestia. Representatives of the intellectually superior Aethels, the mighty Volgon lords, and seasoned diplomats from other races were present, their faces reflecting palpable anxiety. "We are facing an unprecedented problem," began Thane, an Aethel diplomat known for his composure and sharp analytical skills. "Humans, the species we have ranked lowest in the galactic power classification system, have just defeated one of the top Volgon warriors by relying entirely on something other than brute strength. This breaks all our predictive models." A Volgon lord named Krill, with a colossal physique and a voice like thunder, slammed his hand on the table. "We cannot let this continue. If one human can do that, what will happen if they learn to fight properly? Or if they ally with our enemies? Muscle power is the foundation of this order." Thane calmly replied, "That is precisely the point." Emma did not use strength. She used intellect, adaptability, and the ability to find weaknesses. These are qualities we have overlooked, or underestimated, in humans. We need to understand this potential better. The meeting lasted for hours, filled with heated arguments. Finally, a special committee was formed to study the Emma phenomenon and its implications. They proposed a two-pronged plan. Closely monitor Emma. Ensure every one of her matches is thoroughly analyzed. Every movement, every tactic recorded. The goal is to better understand humanity's capabilities and find ways to contain them if necessary. Re-evaluate policies towards humanity. Propose loosening some restrictions on human labor and movement, hoping to control discontent and avoid a potential uprising. At the same time, some even suggested studying human, adaptive genes, for military or technological purposes of the major races. While political and scientific debates raged at the highest levels, Emma was grappling with new pressures. She was no longer an anonymous mine worker. Now, she was the center of attention. Her image filled media channels, accompanied by bewildering praise or misleading analyses. In the arena's Shu-Shi area, where fighters prepared for their next match, Emma noticed the eyes of other opponents had changed. The initial disdain was now mixed with curiosity, caution, and sometimes even fear. They no longer saw her as a joke, but as a dangerous unknown. The arena's trainer, a nimble Scorn hybrid, approached Emma with a serious expression. "You've caused quite a mess, human," he said. "The bookmakers have lost millions of credits. And what's more, you've angered the Volgons. Your next match will be a true test." "Who is my opponent?" Emma asked, her voice still calm. "It's Ragnar the Unyielding," the Scorn trainer said, his expression shifting slightly. "He's a Zygar fighter, famous for his terrifying counterattacks and a nearly impenetrable biological armor. He's also defeated many Volgons. He's a living wall. No one can make him budge an inch." Hearing Ragnar's name, Emma felt a slight tension. She had watched Ragnar's matches. He was not only powerful but also very cunning. with far fewer openings than Vorlag. This would be a completely different battle, requiring an entirely new strategy. She knew she couldn't repeat her old tactics. The pressure weighed heavily on Emma's shoulders. She not only had to prove herself again, but also had to face the expectations of all humanity watching her every move. Now, every action she took in the arena was not just fighting, but a statement. With the news of her next opponent, Ragnar the Unyielding, Emma knew she couldn't rely on simple agility and mechanical weakness exploitation like in the previous match. Ragnar was not just a living steel wall, he was also a cunning warrior. Having participated in hundreds of matches and rarely revealing obvious openings, the Zygar species' natural biological armor made conventional attacks ineffective. The days leading up to the next match were Emma's most rigorous. Now, she was not only fighting in the arena but also battling herself and the invisible pressures from all sides. She barely slept, dedicating every spare moment to studying. Emma accessed the arena's data archives, searching for all of Ragnar's past matches. She watched them repeatedly, not just once, but dozens, hundreds of times. She didn't just look at Ragnar's attacks, she also analyzed his defense. How he adjusted his center of gravity, and even the smallest habits when he moved or transitioned between attack and defense states. She noticed that Ragnar, though resilient, still had some fixed patterns of movement. For example, when he prepared for an extremely powerful counterattack, there would be a slight contraction in his left shoulder muscle for a fraction of a millisecond, a signal almost imperceptible to the naked eye. But a key point for Emma to predict his next move. Furthermore, although Ragnar's biological armor was very hard, she suspected that large joints, such as elbows and knees, might still be potential weak points. Especially if struck at the correct angle and moment when they were under the greatest load. Emma also began training herself with even crazier intensity. She used heavy stones and discarded materials from the mine to simulate Ragnar's attacks. She focused on increasing her body's flexibility, its ability to withstand minor impacts, and especially improving her ability to read her opponent's movements. She tried to visualize herself in the arena with Ragnar, reacting to his every move before it actually happened. She knew that her speed and precision had to be perfect to exploit Ragnar's fleeting openings. On the human side, Emma's defeat of Vorlag had generated a widespread wave of hope. In distant colonies, dilapidated industrial areas, and even underground slums, people began to spread stories of the human warrior. Emma's photos and videos, though transmitted through illicit channels, became a source of inspiration. Human communities began organizing small gatherings to watch her matches, with the burning hope that Emma would once again perform a miracle. Even some aethal scientists, fascinated by Emma's abilities, began to delve deeper into human biology and adaptability. They no longer regarded humans as a subordinate species, but as a subject of great potential research. Others began to raise ethical questions about how the Alliance had treated humanity for millennia. The day of the match with Ragnar the Unyielding arrived. The atmosphere in the arena was even more tense than before. This time, there was no mocking laughter when Emma walked out. Instead, there was a waiting silence, occasionally interspersed with anxious whispers. All eyes, from aethal politicians to Volgon laborers, were fixed on the small girl standing opposite the wall of muscle and biological armor. Ragnar emerged, not an ounce of expression on his rough face. He was the embodiment of indestructibility, an opponent who could not be defeated by brute force. Emma knew this was not just a match. This was a battle of intellect against strength, of adaptability against rigidity, and of hope against oppression. The opening gong sounded, shattering the suffocating silence of the Infinity Arena. All eyes focused on the center of the fighting floor, where Emma, a tiny speck amidst vast steel and colossal beings, stood facing Ragnar the Unyielding. Ragnar did not charge impetuously like Vorlag. He stood firm as a mountain, his hands like massive rocks clenched tight, muscles bulging beneath his nearly impenetrable biological armor. He was a wall of steel, a challenge of endurance and counter-attacking ability. Ragnar moved slowly, his steps steady and heavy, gradually closing the distance. He was in no hurry, knowing that his strength would crush any opponent over time. Emma did not rush to attack either. She knew that would be suicide. Instead, she began to move, A fluid and unpredictable dance. She glided left, then abruptly changed direction right, never staying in one place. Ragnar threw a straight punch. A seemingly simple attack that carried terrifying power. Emma dodged, but not completely. She allowed a small portion of the impact to graze her shoulder. Feeling the dreadful air currents and pressure. Immediately, she ducked, moving slightly closer to Ragnar. In that instant, she noticed the slight contraction in his left shoulder muscle, the signal she had meticulously studied. He's going to counter, Emma thought to herself. As predicted, as Emma dodged the blow, Ragnar immediately spun, preparing to unleash a powerful sweeping counterattack. He was confident that no one could avoid that strike at such close range. But Emma had anticipated it. Instead of retreating, she lunged straight into the extremely narrow space between Ragnar's arm and torso as he was spinning. It was an enormous risk, but she had calculated it. In that fleeting moment, as Ragnar was putting force into his counterattack, Emma used her full weight and the inertia from her lunge to strike Ragnar's elbow joint hard. But not the outside, rather, an extremely sensitive point on the inside, where the biological armor was slightly thinner and adjacent to a nerve. She didn't try to break or dislocate the joint. Her goal was to cause a localized energy shock, temporarily disrupting the bioelectrical flow. A guttural erupted from Ragnar, not a sound of pain but an expression of unexpected discomfort. His counterattack was deflected, its force dispersed and no longer precise. Ragnar stumbled slightly, a look of confusion in his eyes. No one had ever made him lose his balance, not even for such a tiny moment. Emma didn't stop. She knew she couldn't match his strength. Her strategy was to weaken and disrupt. She constantly moved, weaving, attacking the small weak points she had noted. A light kick to the Achilles tendon when Ragnar shifted his weight. A precise punch to the temple when he was focused on dodging another blow. Or a strong impact to the knee joint when he was putting force into a jump. These blows didn't cause significant damage to Ragnar, but they continuously distracted him, caused discomfort, and gradually weakened his coordination. Ragnar became enraged. He, an undefeated warrior, was so annoyed by a small creature like Emma. He lunged with even greater speed, his punches becoming more furious and erratic. This was exactly what Emma wanted. When Ragnar lost control, he would reveal more openings. Emma exploited a momentary opening in Ragnar, when he delivered a powerful sweeping blow that left him off balance for a split second. She lunged forward, not to attack, but to use her entire body to push hard into the back of Ragnar's knee joint, where he was putting all his weight. At the same time, she used one foot to push hard into the front of his other leg. It was a double impact, making it impossible for Ragnar to maintain his balance. With a resounding roar and an earth-shattering crash, Ragnar the Unyielding, the living steel wall, collapsed onto the arena floor. He wasn't completely defeated, but he had been thrown off balance, his biological armor impacting hard against the floor, causing large cracks. Ragnar tried to get up, but his movements were slow and difficult. He wasn't knocked out, but he was temporarily incapacitated. The referee, after a moment of stunned silence, finally waved his flag. Ragnar the Unyielding is incapacitated. The winner is Emma. The entire arena erupted in cheers. This time, it wasn't laughter or mere surprise, but admiration. From the Aethel stands, rhythmic applause echoed, a rare sight for beings who typically expressed emotions through logic. The Volgons, though still stunned, also began to realize they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Emma hadn't just defeated Ragnar, she had changed how everyone defined strength. Emma stood there, panting, drenched in sweat, but her eyes still burned brightly. She had overcome a seemingly insurmountable wall. 2 matches, 2 victories, and the entire galaxy had to pay attention. Emma's victory against Ragnar the Unyielding was no longer a mere shock event. It was a symbol, a clear declaration of humanity's unexpected potential. The shockwave from the Infinity Arena had now turned into a powerful current, affecting every corner of the galaxy. On the planet Kareth, Kale, the Volgon supervisor, couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. He smashed objects in his office, roaring in anger. What he had always considered scum was now making history. This directly threatened his pride and power in the mine. He began to tighten regulations on human workers, seeking to extinguish any glimmer of hope or nascent rebellion. However, his actions only fueled the resolve of the humans on Kareth, who silently followed Emma's every move. In distant colonies, news of Emma spread by all means, from illicit communication channels to whispered accounts. Humans, long accustomed to an oppressed existence, now began to hold their heads high. They gathered in small plazas, dilapidated eateries, glued to pirated screens showing Emma's matches. Conversations shifted from complaints about difficult lives to discussions about Emma's tactics, about her ability to read her opponents. A small movement, without a clear leader or organization, but full of spiritual power, was gradually forming. Meanwhile, on Celestia, the members of the Galactic Alliance were divided into factions. The mighty Volgon faction, led by Lord Krill, a figure whose prestige was built on strength and dominance, was now even more enraged and panicked. This is an insult. The rise of this inferior race will undermine our entire power structure. Krill roared, his eyes blazing red. We must implement immediate repressive measures. Ban extraterrestrials from participating in the Infinity Arena. Increase control over human colonies. Conversely, Aethel diplomats and scientists offered new arguments. Thane, the Aethel diplomat, stood before the council with detailed analytical data. We cannot ignore this. Ladies and gentlemen, humanity's capabilities, especially Emma's, have far exceeded all predictions. If we try to suppress them, we might push a race with great potential into rebellion. Instead of containment, we should seek to understand and, if possible, exploit this potential. Aethel scientists had discovered that the human brain possessed an amazingly flexible neural connectivity, allowing them to learn and change their thinking faster than many other races. They hypothesized that physical weakness had forced humanity to develop intellect and adaptability to a higher degree for survival. These theories began to spread among Aethel intellectuals, causing many of them to change their views on humanity from contempt to curiosity and even admiration. On human colonial planets, the cheering for Emma became an expression of defiance. Pirated news reports of her matches were disseminated everywhere. On Kareth, human mine workers began small acts of resistance against Kale's oppression. They worked slower, found ways to malfunction the machines Emma had once repaired to hinder Kale, and subtly helped each other more. An old Volgon named Xylos, the gatekeeper at the Kareth mine, who had initially mocked Emma, now sat quietly in front of the news screen. His sarcastic remarks gradually faded, replaced by thoughtful eyes. He had lived long enough to witness many powerful races come and go, but had never seen a weak individual cause such a major disruption. One afternoon, he secretly approached a group of human workers watching news about Emma and gently placed a small package of food near them. A simple yet meaningful gesture. Back in the Infinity Arena, Emma still faced new challenges. She had overcome 3 opponents representing strength, resilience, and speed. Now, her next opponent was Zephyr the Scion, a warrior from the Lumen species. Renowned for his telekinetic powers, Zephyr could lift objects with his mind, create invisible energy shields, and unleash psychic energy blasts from a distance. This was a completely different opponent, relying not on physicality but on mental power and environmental control. Emma knew this match would be an uneven fight in terms of energy. She couldn't counter Zephyr with psychic power, but she believed that every power had its limits and weaknesses. She began to study the principles of physics, how psychic energy was formed and consumed, and especially how it could be disrupted or neutralized. She envisioned scenarios, finding ways to move to avoid being locked by energy fields, and how to use Zephyr's own energy against him. This was no longer just a sports match, it was a battle of ideologies. Could human intellect and adaptability overcome even the limits of psychic power? The atmosphere in the Infinity Arena was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew this match would be completely different. No more steel punches or blistering speed, but a battle of will and energy. Zephyr the Scion, the Lumen warrior with faintly glowing skin and deep, intelligent eyes, stepped onto the arena floor. He carried no physical weapons, but possessed something far more formidable, the ability to control matter with his mind. Emma faced Zephyr, feeling an invisible energy radiating from her opponent. She knew she couldn't rely on physical strength or speed to win. This was a battle on a higher level, a chess match where only the most astute could hope to survive. The opening gong sounded, but there was no immediate flash attack. Zephyr stood still, his hands slightly raised, and immediately, metallic debris on the floor, small rocks from previous matches, began to hover in the air around him. It was a threatening display of telekinetic power. Emma didn't react, she didn't flee or attack. Instead, she focused on observing her surroundings and sensing the invisible force fields. She had studied the lumen species' psychic energy. It wasn't magic, but a form of energy controlled by will, adhering to its own physical laws. Its weakness? Concentration and energy consumption. Zephyr began his attack. He didn't charge, but used his mind to hurl metallic fragments at Emma with terrifying speed. Emma dodged, but not by running in circles. She moved in an unexpected straight line, lunging, then suddenly stopping, abruptly changing direction. She didn't just dodge the incoming projectiles, but also the invisible force fields Zephyr was creating to try and trap her. Zephyr frowned. He was used to opponents struggling within his energy fields. But Emma was too unpredictable. She not only dodged tangible objects, but also avoided the invisible pressures he created. This forced him to expend more energy to maintain control. Emma knew she couldn't let the match drag on. Zephyr's psychic power would exhaust her if she only defended. She needed to force him to waste energy. Emma began a dance of misdirection. She would lunge forward, as if to attack directly, then suddenly change direction, forcing Zephyr to react by creating an energy shield or a blocking force field. Each time, Zephyr expended energy, as Zephyr attempted to lift a larger rock, preparing for a decisive attack. Emma sensed his intense concentration. That was the moment of weakness. When a scion concentrated on a large attack, their defenses would be dispersed. Emma charged, not by running, but by a swift slide across the arena floor. She aimed directly at the center of the energy field Zephyr was creating, where the energy concentration was highest but also where it was most susceptible to sudden disruption. In that instant, Emma swung a small object she had picked up from the floor, a small piece of metal, and threw it directly into the center of the energy field. It wasn't a powerful throw, but it was precise. The metallic fragment struck the convergence point of Zephyr's energy. A whoosh echoed as Zephyr's energy field wavered. He roared in pain, not from physical injury, but from the sudden disruption of the psychic energy flow that caused a backlash into his mind. Zephyr stumbled, his psychic energy disrupted. The hovering rocks fell to the arena floor with a violent crash. He clutched his head, staggering, unable to maintain control. Emma did not attack further. She had achieved her goal. Zephyr was incapacitated, unable to continue fighting. The referee, with an incredulous expression, approached. Zephyr, the invincible scion warrior, had been subdued by a completely different strategy. The winner is Emma. The entire arena erupted in frantic cheers. The admiration had surpassed all limits. Emma had not only defeated the physically strongest or fastest, she had also defeated a telekinetic. She had proven that human intellect and adaptability could overcome all barriers, even those seemingly supernatural. Emma's battle with Zephyr had completely changed the landscape. It was not just a victory, but an ideological revolution. Humanity was no longer a weak or inferior species. They were a force to be reckoned with, a race with limitless potential, capable of breaking all known rules. Emma's victory against Zephyr the Scion decisively dispelled all doubts about humanity's capabilities. She was no longer an anomaly, but a clear symbol of an inevitable change. The entire galaxy trembled, not just from the results of the matches, but from the deeper implications they brought. On Celestia, the atmosphere in the Galactic Alliance meetings had completely changed. The angry growls of Volgon Lord Krill gradually weakened before the sharp arguments of Thane. The Aethel diplomat, Thane presented data, demonstrating that humanity's weakness had forced them to develop mental and adaptive abilities that other races, relying on innate strength, had neglected. We cannot continue to ignore this potential, Thane declared to the Council. Humans are not just a species. They are a new model of evolution. living proof that intellect can overcome all physical limitations. If we try to suppress them, we will create an unnecessary and costly war. And worse, we will miss the opportunity to learn from them, or even to harness their potential. Some aethal scientists began to openly publish their research on the flexible neural structure of the human brain, its ability to process complex information, and its extraordinary learning speed. There were even aethal envoys who began discussing the establishment of cultural and scientific exchange programs with human settlements. An unimaginable prospect just weeks prior. The Volgon faction still tried to resist, but their voices were gradually drowned out. Economists pointed to the chaos in the financial markets and among bookmakers, where the odds for humanity had completely shifted, indicating a massive flow of money. Military strategists worried about the potential of a race capable of such rapid tactical adaptation if properly trained. Finally, an unofficial agreement began to form. The alliance would not suppress Emma, but would let her continue to compete, while sending experts to closely monitor her every move. On human colonies, the spark of hope had ignited into a great fire. Emma became a hero, living proof that they were not worthless. The human mine workers on Kareth, led by some inspired young individuals, began organizing small strikes, demanding fair rights and better working conditions. Emma's championship had given them a voice, an unprecedented unity. The Galactic Alliance was forced to intervene, demanding Kale's concession to avoid a large-scale rebellion. Kale was eventually deposed, his position replaced by a more moderate Volgon who began implementing reforms to appease the situation. Xylos, the old gatekeeper, with proud eyes, said he had witnessed the dawn of a race. However, alongside hope, anxieties also began to stir. If Emma lost her next match, would all this progress collapse? Would the Galactic Alliance revert to its old oppressive policies? The pressure on Emma's shoulders was not just that of an individual, but of an entire species. The Infinity Arena tournament had reached its final rounds. Emma's next opponent, and her final opponent before the grand final, was a name that surprised everyone: Malachor the Shadow. Malachor was a legendary warrior from the Varkos species, a mysterious and little-known race, renowned for his absolute stealth, silent movement, and deadly strikes from the shadows. He had long since retired and only returned to participate in this special tournament. Malachor was not a typical opponent. He did not rely on strength or speed, but on concealment and the element of surprise. He could disappear from sight, glide like a ghost, and strike when his opponent was completely unaware. This was an entirely new challenge, a battle against something unseen, untouchable. Emma knew that to defeat Malachor, she couldn't rely solely on visual observation or sensing pressure. She needed to transcend ordinary senses, find a way to detect and neutralize an invisible enemy. She began researching various energy fields, sound wave frequencies, and the most advanced detection techniques. She envisioned using the arena environment itself, dust particles, the smallest air currents, to detect Malachor's presence. This would be her toughest match, a final test to prove that human intellect and adaptability could overcome even the invisible darkness. The Infinity Arena tonight was shrouded in an eerie silence, not due to a lack of spectators, but because of the nature of the upcoming match. There were no more fervent cheers or boisterous encouragement. Instead, there were tense whispers and eyes fixed on the dimly lit arena floor. Emma's opponent was Malachor the Shadow, a warrior from the Varkos species, renowned for his absolute stealth and sudden, deadly strikes. When the opening gong sounded, the arena floor was bathed in a dim light, creating ideal conditions for Malachor. Emma stepped out, her eyes scanning the space, trying to sense any disturbance. Opposite her, where Malachor had just stood, was now just empty space. He had vanished. Emma didn't panic. She knew this was inevitable. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to move. She didn't run, but walked slowly, focusing on senses other than sight. She listened for the smallest sounds, felt the changing air currents, and even the subtle vibrations of the surrounding energy field. Malachor attacked. A chilling gust of wind whizzed past Emma's neck, narrowly missing her. She took a step back, turning. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to deliver the killing blow. Emma began to employ her strategy. She didn't try to find Malachor with her eyes, instead, she focused on creating disturbances in the environment. She ran in a circle around the arena floor, constantly changing her speed and direction randomly. Each step she took, each time she changed direction, created a small airflow, a vibration in the air. Malachor, though invisible, was still a physical entity. He needed to move, he needed to breathe, and every one of his movements created a small change in the environment. Emma had studied sound frequencies and ultrasonic waves. She knew that even the smallest movements created a pressure wave, an invisible signature. As Emma ran, she suddenly stopped, then delivered a powerful kick to the arena floor. The impact echoed, and Emma focused on analyzing the reverberation of the sound, looking for any distortion or interruption that could indicate Malachor's position. It was like using echoes to map out an invisible blueprint of her surroundings. Malachor hadn't expected this tactic. He was used to opponents panicking, trying to see him, but Emma was using hearing and sensation to see him. He decided to intensify his attack, moving faster, trying to exhaust Emma. Emma felt a colder current of air and a very slight change in air pressure behind her. She knew Malachor was lunging. Instead of completely dodging, Emma suddenly spun around, throwing a handful of dust from the arena floor, which she had quietly gathered before the match, directly into the space in front of her. The dust scattered in the air, and for a fleeting moment, Malachor's blurry silhouette appeared as the dust particles clung to his camouflage. Though it was only a glimpse, it was enough for Emma to pinpoint his location. Without hesitation, Emma lunged. She didn't attack with a punch. Instead, she aimed for Malachor's stealth system control unit, a small device attached to his belt that she had meticulously researched through leaked information. With a swift, cutting motion, she used a small tool she had prepared, a small clip she used for machine repairs, and damaged the device. With a growl, Malachor's camouflage collapsed. He became visible, a Varkos warrior with dark skin and sharp eyes. Now standing exposed for all to see. He was caught off guard, losing his greatest advantage. Malachor, enraged by the humiliation, charged at Emma with physical force. He was still a formidable warrior, but no longer an invisible ghost. Emma had stripped him of his most potent weapon. She continued to dodge, utilizing her agility. When Malachor threw a punch, Emma ducked, then used the very force of that punch to push Malachor into one of the arena's pillars. A crash echoed as Malachor impacted hard. He collapsed, dazed. Emma didn't need to deliver a finishing blow. He was incapacitated. The referee declared, "The winner is Emma." The arena erupted in cheers, echoing throughout. This time, it wasn't surprise or admiration, but adoration. Emma had defeated not just a warrior, but a concept. She had proven that even the unseen could be detected and neutralized by intellect and thorough preparation. Emma stood there, drenched in sweat, but her eyes still burned brightly. She had overcome every obstacle, defeated every form of power the galaxy had ever known. Now, only one final match remained. The grand final of the Infinity Arena. Emma's victory over Malachor the Shadow surpassed even the wildest expectations. She had not only proven that human intellect and adaptability could defeat physical strength, speed, or psychic abilities, but also seemingly invincible stealth. The Infinity Arena was no longer a stage for brute force, but a theater of strategic thinking and resilience. The entire galaxy held its breath, awaiting the grand final. Emma's opponent, revealed in a spectacular ceremony, was a name that astonished everyone: Valerius the Elder, a legendary warrior from the Sentinel species, who had won the Infinity Arena Championship centuries ago and was considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. Valerius was not only powerful, but also possessed unparalleled combat experience, the ability to instantly analyze opponents, and a deadly composure. He did not rely on absolute strength, but on the perfection of technique, precision in every movement, and the ability to predict his opponent's every move. Valerius's appearance created a wave of surprise and apprehension. Many believed this was a final effort by the Galactic Alliance, especially the Volgon faction and some conservative Aethel members, to prevent Emma from claiming the title. They wanted to prove that there were still limits that even human intellect could not overcome. Emma understood this clearly. Valerius was not just an opponent, he was a test of knowledge. A final examination of her adaptability. He was the embodiment of experience and technique. A fortress built from hundreds of battles. Emma reviewed Valerius's old matches. He was a master of defense and counterattack, capable of exploiting any minor mistake from his opponent. While Emma was preparing for the grand final, the political developments behind her became increasingly complex. Volgon Lord Krill, in despair, had begun to contact various individuals and clandestine factions within the Galactic Alliance. He could not accept a human becoming champion. He considered it an unforgivable humiliation. And if Emma won, Volgon power would be severely shaken. Krill began planning to permanently neutralize Emma, or at least prevent her from winning, even if it meant resorting to the dirtiest tactics. He ordered his covert agents to sabotage Emma, or at least distract her before the grand final. Conversely, Thane and the Aethel scientists openly supported Emma. They saw Emma not just as a fighter, but as a game changer. They began to convince other Aethel leaders that accepting and studying human potential would bring long-term benefits to the entire alliance, helping them better understand concepts like extreme adaptability and nonlinear intelligence. Some even proposed including Emma in high-level Aethel scientific research projects after the tournament. On the planet Kareth, Kale, after his failed attempts at oppression, realized that he could not extinguish the fire of hope in the hearts of the human workers. He began to fear for his position. However, some Volgons in the mine, including Xylos, publicly expressed their respect for Emma. There were even some young Volgons, not bound by old prejudices, who began to challenge Kale, demanding fairer treatment for humans. Emma, completely unaware of the conspiracies and power struggles unfolding around her, remained focused on preparing for the final match. She knew that Valerius had no obvious physical or psychic weaknesses. His only weakness was his reliance on experience and known rules. Emma needed to create a completely unpredictable situation, and ordered chaos, to force Valerius to react instinctively rather than rationally. She had endured so much. From an unknown mine worker, she had become a symbol of hope. Now, she was just one step away from rewriting the history of humanity in the galaxy. The Infinity Arena tonight was more crowded than ever. The air was thick with anticipation, mixed with excitement and anxiety. The grand final was not just a sporting confrontation, it was a clash of two eras. Two philosophies of strength. On one side was Valerius the Elder, a living legend, the embodiment of experience, perfect technique, and invincibility according to established rules. On the other side was Emma, the small girl from a despised race, who had rewritten all rules with her extraordinary intellect and adaptability. When the opening gong sounded, the arena floor was bathed in brilliant light, clearly revealing the two combatants. Valerius stood there, composed, his aged but sharp eyes sweeping over Emma. He showed no disdain, only absolute focus and an almost emotionless expression. Emma met his gaze with unwavering determination. Valerius did not rush to attack. He moved step by step, maintaining distance, observing Emma like a master studying a novel opponent. His every movement was perfect. Not a single wasted bit of energy. Not the slightest opening. He was a wall of steel, an invisible barrier of experience and technique. Emma knew she couldn't wait for Valerius to make a mistake, because he almost never did. She needed to create an opening. She began to move, but not in known patterns. She ran in circles, then abruptly stopped, jumped sideways, then charged straight towards Valerius before suddenly changing direction. She tried to break all predictions, forcing Valerius to react instinctively rather than relying on his established experience. Valerius, with his peak technique, remained steady. He closely followed Emma's every move, dodging or neutralizing every feint attack, every attempt to distract. He seemed to read Emma's every thought, blocking every path she could take, turning her into prey trapped in an invisible cage. The match dragged on, but Emma showed no signs of exhaustion. She knew Valerius was trying to wear down her patience, but she was prepared for that. She continued her relentless dance, not just to find openings, but also to analyze Valerius's reactions. She realized that, no matter how perfect he was, Valerius still had a very subtle rhythm in his every reactive movement, a repetition that only Emma with her detailed observation skills honed in the mind, could discern, in a decisive moment, when Valerius perfectly blocked a feint kick from Emma with a flawless movement. Emma suddenly unleashed a completely unexpected action. She did not attack Valerius. Instead, she lunged straight down to the arena floor, using her hands and feet to strike hard at a meticulously calculated point on the arena surface. A crash echoed. The arena floor trembled. It wasn't a blow, but a deliberate disruption, a sudden shock of sound and vibration. Valerius, who completely hadn't expected such an action, lost his focus for a fraction of a millisecond. His body, which had been in a state of perfect readiness, stiffened for an instant due to the surprise. That was the moment Emma had been waiting for. In the instant Valerius was disrupted, she lunged, not with a punch or a kick. She aimed for Valerius's balance mechanism, a point that his experience could not protect when surprised. Emma used her entire body weight, combined with a twisting force, and pushed hard into Valerius's hip joint from an unpredictable angle. Valerius, once again, was completely taken by surprise. He tried to maintain his balance, but Emma's move was too sudden and unusual compared to anything he had ever faced. He stumbled, losing control for a rare moment. Emma didn't need to do anything more. Valerius, with his perfection, could not accept a momentary loss of control. He tried to react, but his body could not keep up with his mind. Finally, with a sigh, he voluntarily knelt down, accepting defeat. The referee, with the most stunned expression since the beginning of the tournament, announced, "The grand final. The winner, the champion of this year's Infinity Arena, is Emma." The entire arena erupted in cheers. The cheering was not just joy, but triumph. From the Aethel stands, thunderous applause resonated. The Volgons, though initially grim, now stood up and cheered, accepting the unbelievable outcome. Emma had not only won a match, she had changed a universe. Emma stood there, drenched in sweat, but her eyes burning brightly. She had done it. From a despised mine worker, she had become the champion of the Infinity Arena. She had proven that humanity, with its intellect and adaptability, could overcome all limits and break all established rules. The unending cheers in the Infinity Arena echoed throughout the galaxy, becoming the symphony of a new era. Emma, the small warrior from a scorned race, stood at the pinnacle of glory. Her victory over Valerius the Elder was more than just a title, it was the breaking of all limits. A declaration that human intellect and adaptability could overcome all prejudice and all forms of power. On the planet Kareth, Kale, the Volgon supervisor, had completely crumbled. He couldn't accept the truth. The human workers, now fearless, collectively went on strike, demanding fair rights and better working conditions. Emma's championship had given them a voice, an unprecedented unity. The Galactic Alliance was forced to intervene, demanding Kale's concession to avoid a large-scale rebellion. Kale was eventually deposed, his position replaced by a more moderate Volgon who began implementing reforms to appease the situation. Xylos, the old gatekeeper, with proud eyes, said he had witnessed the dawn of a race. Across human colonies, communities organized spontaneous celebrations. Emma's image became a symbol of humanity's resilience and boundless potential. Economic activities began to flourish, as other races started to view humans as potential partners, no longer just cheap labor. Many oppressed humans now began to leave the slums, seeking new opportunities on planets they were previously forbidden to set foot on. On Celestia, Emma's impact was even more profound. Lord Krill, after Emma's victory, attempted to incite a small mutiny, declaring that the Alliance had been weak for allowing a human to ascend. However, his conspiracy was quickly quelled by the decisive reaction of the Aethel members and the majority of other races, who had realized the benefits of embracing change. Krill was stripped of all power and exiled. Thane, the Aethel diplomat, along with progressive scientists and thinkers, put forth a historic proposal: the establishment of a Human Development Council, under the patronage of the Galactic Alliance. This council would be tasked with further researching humanity's potential, supporting their technological and intellectual development, and gradually integrating them into key positions within the Alliance structure. Aethel scientists published groundbreaking discoveries about humanity's unique neural capabilities. indicating that their brains could form connections and solve problems in ways that even the Aethel's superior intellect had never explored. They proposed collaborating with humans on scientific, technological, and even military projects, arguing that human adaptability and strategic thinking would be invaluable assets to the entire galaxy. After her victory, Emma did not return to an ordinary life. She became a crucial figure in negotiations between humanity and the Galactic Alliance. She was not just a warrior, she was a natural diplomat. With the composure and sharp analytical skills that had helped her win in the arena, Emma declined invitations to join the military or become a political icon, choosing instead to participate in the Human Development Council. In her new role, Emma tirelessly advocated for humanity's development, ensuring they were treated fairly and had the opportunity to fully realize their potential. She traveled across the galaxy, sharing her story, inspiring millions of oppressed humans. She proved that without superhuman strength or advanced technology, simply with intellect, will, and belief, an individual could change an entire universe. The old era of dominance based on physical strength gradually faded. A new era, where intellect, adaptability, and the capacity for learning were highly valued, was dawning, and it all began with a small girl named Emma, who was once a whisper among the stones, and now became a resounding voice across the stars.